Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here with us this evening. I'm calling to order this Operations Management Budget Governmental Accountability and Budget hearing to order. I'm the co-chair of OMBGA, Council President Mally Rosado, along with my co-chair, Assistant Majority Leader TJ Clark, who's sitting to my right. To my far right is Councilman Amilcar Hernandez, followed by Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon. To my left, I have Councilman John Gale, along with Councilwoman Tiana Hercules. For this evening, we're going to see a presentation from ES&T, Emergency Services Telecommunications, followed by Department of Public Works. And with us this evening from Emergency Services and Telecommunications Department is the Director, Susan Webster, and the Deputy Director, Jeffrey Cavello. The floor is yours to start your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Council President, members of the Council, it's wonderful to see you all in person finally and not via webcam. So tonight we're going to give you the presentation for the Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications for our fiscal year 2024 recommended budget. As soon as I figure out how to work this. Oh, there we go. All right, perfect. Sorry about that. Excellent. So we're going to start with the mission of the department, which has not changed over this fiscal year. We've reviewed it and feel as though it still meets the needs of our department. The City of Hartford Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications core mission is to provide high-quality emergency services communications to police, fire, and emergency medical services personnel and the City of Hartford citizens. We will carry out this mission by receiving calls for service, dispatching the appropriate resources, tracking and coordinating information flow and resources, initiating records for all emergency events, and enhancing the effectiveness, efficiencies, coordination, and interoperability of emergency services providers. This is an overview of the organizational chart for the department. Obviously, myself as the director, I have Deputy Director Cavello here with me today. We have 1 training manager. We have 7 public safety communications supervisors. We have 1 support services manager, which is grant funded through the state of Connecticut on an annual basis. We have 1 information technology manager. We have a senior administrative assistant. And then the support underneath them are quality improvement coordinators, our emergency telecommunications dispatchers, which is actually the core of our department. We also have per diem dispatchers within the department. We have our radio services team. We have an FOI administrative clerk, an information technology department with 2 personnel, and our alarms enforcement division with 2 personnel. The highlights from fiscal year 2023, I think it's best to show the progress of the department and what we have done by looking at our calls for service. So we've done an overview of fiscal year 2022, 2021, and 2020. As you can see, our calls for service via the 911 system have significantly increased over the past several years, for fiscal 2022 being over 142,000 calls for service. Our administrative phone lines, which as you can see are actually busier than our 911 calls for service, those calls are also increasing to just over 310,000 calls for service in fiscal year 2022, with our total calls received increasing to 453,153 for fiscal year 2022. The other important thing we do within the department are our calls dispatched. We dispatch police, fire, and emergency medical services. You'll see that this particular slide is broken down into those separate disciplines. The fire department responds to both fire suppression calls and fire medical calls along with our ambulance providers. You can see the differences in those calls for service. Police has seen a decrease in calls for service from fiscal year 21 and 22 to fiscal year 2022 with 111 calls for service. Those calls for service are calls, they're not officers or the number of officers that are responding to those calls. The medical calls are staying relatively consistent over the past 3 years, as are both fire suppression and ambulance calls for service. Additional highlights from this past fiscal year is our public safety radio infrastructure. This has been a project that we've been working on over the past several years. We have executed we've executed an RFP process. The winner of that RFP was Eastern Communications. They were awarded the contract, and we are currently working to get the contract signed so we can move forward with purchasing the entire radio infrastructure, and that's very exciting. I know the Public Safety Committee has been very integral in purchasing that system. We've also developed a new training program. We took on board a new training coordinator who managed through an entirely new training curriculum, as over the past several years we've had a reduced number of dispatchers, and we knew that we needed to increase the number of dispatchers and improve that training curriculum. So our first training academy started on November 21st, 2022 with 17 new hires. That's the first time the department has ever hired that many people at one given time. Typically, we would hire 3 or 4 people at any given time. We increased it to 17, knowing that we had to make a significant change. They spent 8 weeks of intensive classroom training and then 16 to 24 weeks of training directly on the dispatch floor with communications training officers. We now have 11 left out of the 17, but they're all doing incredibly well. Also working with human resources to get additional dispatchers on board. We have additional interviews scheduled for next week. We successfully increased the hourly rate for telecommunicators and supervisors to be in line with the emergency communication centers throughout the state of Connecticut. We've seen that we are getting a better rate of those that are applying for the job and folks that are qualified to do that. So this made a large difference in what we're doing in the dispatch center. And one of the other important things we did was implement an electronic protocol to provide pre-arrival instructions on all medical calls for service. And for next year, as you'll see, and what we're looking to do next year, we want to integrate with that our computer-aided dispatch system. One of the things that was really exciting this year was the implementation of the HEART team. And our department took a very large role, as it was a big change for us to dispatch non-emergency responders out to calls. So we deployed all new policies and procedures for dispatchers, for responders, for the HEART team, for individuals in crisis. And this included suicide attempts and suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations, self-harming, homelessness, panhandling, loitering, and violent and nonviolent mental health emergencies. And just this week, we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the HEART team, and it was very exciting for us and the entire community. Thank you, Councilman. And our strategic initiatives for next year are to develop and improve efficiencies through technology. I spoke about that call intake process for medical calls. We're looking to change that to an electronic version so we can improve those efficiencies through the call taking process for our dispatchers as well as the call takers. Enhance our staffing and workforce development by sending more dispatchers to training opportunities. And once we increase our staffing numbers, we'll be able to do that and provide in-house training and training through outside sources as well. We want to ensure service resilience and optimization, which is something that has been our goal for the year, throughout the years, and we're going to continue to do it within the next fiscal year. And we also intend to implement processes and improvements to enhance through policies and procedures. Our policies and procedures have not been reviewed on an annual basis. We want to make sure that our dispatchers have a clear understanding of what their obligations are as dispatchers, as well as our supervisors and our other team members. So that's one of our priorities for next year, is to go through all of our policies and procedures and make sure everything is up to date. So our budget comparison from fiscal year 2023 to 2024, you'll see an overall change of 18.7%. Our grants have gone down 7.1%, for a total change of 13.2%. As far as the general fund is concerned, we put in for an increase of 4 public safety telecommunications dispatchers and 1 public safety communications supervisor. Deputy Director Covello did a very large study on the number of dispatchers that you should have in a public safety answering point of our size to make sure we have the right number of supervisors that are overseeing those dispatchers and bring us up to those industry standards. So in our budget this year, we are requesting the increase of 4 dispatchers and 1 public safety supervisor within the dispatch center. That would bring us from 41 dispatchers to 45, and our public safety communications supervisors from 7 to 8. So that's the major difference that you'll see in our budget for this new fiscal year. Other budget highlights are our non-personnel operating costs remain unchanged from the previous fiscal year, with the exception of service contracts. Some of those we had control over, but most of them we do not. So we did see some increases for our service contracts. And the salaries increased were contractual step increases for the unions and the addition of those 5 positions that I just discussed. I was glad we were able to present this next slide. I know that Human Resources typically does this, but now as a department, we're able to report to you what the composition of our overall staff is. We have a 21% City of Hartford residency, and the remainder 79% are non-city residents. As far as race and ethnicity, 17% are Hispanic, 36% are African American, 36% are Caucasian, 2% are other, and 9% prefer not to say. From a gender perspective, we typically have more females than males within the Public Safety Communications Center, 64% female, 30% male, and then an additional 6% preferred not to say. Oh, I guess I talked really quick. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Oh, Councilman LeBron.
Yes, so I'm so happy and want to celebrate with you, the Hart team. I believe we were there from the beginning at the research point, from the resolution when I wrote it to the research point and all the work that was involved in getting it off the ground, and it's so excited to hear a year in. Could you give us an example of an ideal workflow from the point of the phone call to actual dispatch, and how, like walk us through the policy procedures? I'm hoping that just a quick overview. Yes.
No, and that's a great question, because this was the biggest change for us. So the dispatcher will receive the call, or the call taker will receive the call. It could be through the 911 system. It could be through a non-emergency phone line, just someone requesting assistance. Most of our calls that we give to the Hart team are panhandling complaints or homelessness. So for instance, if we had a panhandling complaint, the dispatcher would take the information, they would process all the information we could for the call, especially a description of the particular person that we're going to be looking for, the name and phone number of the complainant in case we have any additional questions. They enter all that information into the CAD system. Then the EMS dispatcher is tasked with calling either the CRT, or they'll call Wheeler Clinic, or they'll call the mobile crisis team, depending on what the particular incident is. They'll call them, they'll give them all the appropriate information. CRT, I would say, is probably the busiest of all of them, and they do have our portable radios, as does mobile crisis. So once we give them the call for service and they begin to respond, they will call the law enforcement dispatcher over the radio, and they will just say, we're en route to 550 Main Street for homelessness. And then we'll track all the information. And the reason why we want them to have portable radios is just in case they run into a problem out there. It's really a safety issue. We're not always sure exactly what they're going to run into. in the field. They can request a co-response with law enforcement or EMS if necessary.
Wonderful. In the system, in the tracking system, I'm happy that we're building our data, and I would imagine in terms of developing the systems, there'll be some elements of building the plane as you're flying. Built in the system, are we tracking folks that have or require frequent responses? And are we tracking and this may be a question for CRT, but to what extent are we tracking the folks that are frequent callers or require frequent responses?
So we track based on the address and the time and date of the call. We don't track by the name of the individual.
Okay.
But I do know that CRT does track it that way.
Okay. All right. And lastly, where on the grant side, we lost 84,000, 84,000. Was that one particular grant, or was there just an overall reduction in grants?
So we have a typical grant that we get from the state of Connecticut Department of Statewide Emergency Telecommunications. It's the 911 grant that we get annually. We also get a training grant and a capital expenditure grant through the state of Connecticut. The reason that this appears as though there was a reduction is because we received an additional $5 million grant that we're spending down on. So there's additional funds that are available for this year.
Were those COVID monies?
No, we didn't receive any in our department. Those were for the computer dispatch system and the end user radio equipment for law enforcement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilman Hernandez?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm looking at the key performance measures that are on the book, on the budget book, the key performance measures, and all of them, they look very similar from one year to the other, which is good. It's very stable, except one.
Councilman Hernandez?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I can't hear you. Can we up his volume, please?
Hello? Can you hear me better? All right, let's get it closer. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. On the budget booklet, most of the key performance measures that are shown here, they are very similar between one year and the other, pretty steady, except one of them, and I wanted you to give me any information that may perhaps show a little bit of maybe why this may have happened. So there is the number of fire suppression calls dispatched. It seems like every year it stays around the 7,000 dispatch, and then all of a sudden your projection for 2023 is that it's going to go up 10 times to 76,000, and your projection on the recommended budget, it's also 76,000. Was there any reclassification of calls, or is this actually did it actually increase based on the incidents that happen in the city?
No, you're absolutely correct. Those are run right out of the computer dispatch system, and those were the number of dispatch calls by the fire department. And similar to the police department, it's not the number of units that respond, it's the actual incident number that we're tracking. So yes, they did definitely have an increase in their call volume. Why they had that increase, I can't answer for you. We might be able to get more information from Chief Barco, but those are the numbers that we were getting from the computer dispatch system.
Well, that's fine. It was such a huge increase that I wanted to know if there was a reclassification of calls, but it's actually incidents that actually happen. Mm-hmm. So now, following up on that, can you tell me how many vacancies you have right now? Do you have any vacancies?
We do have vacancies. Within our IT division, we had a recent, one of our IT technicians recently left, so we have one vacancy in that department. We have one senior clerk typist vacancy in our alarms division, and we currently have 10 vacancies for emergency telecommunications dispatchers.
So there's 10 vacancies as ETDs, and then your recommended budget is asking for 4 more. So, okay. Is there any particular reason? Is it hard to hire for that particular position?
Yeah, we had a large turnaround recently. We had other people that were leaving for other departments. People got very stressed out during COVID, so we did lose a lot of our dispatchers. And one of the problems with the dispatch center as a whole is it was taking a longer time to recruit, test, and train those individuals. So we've made a lot of changes working with the Human Resources Department, bringing on a new training coordinator, doing thorough background checks on the individuals, and once from the application date, and we've been able to reduce that time, which is so people aren't leaving from even the application process to go to other departments. So it's working well for us. But we also have difficulty. It's a very, very difficult job. And once a dispatcher comes in, they need to be trained in all of the disciplines that we dispatch for. They need to be a call taker, provide EMS dispatch, fire dispatch, law enforcement dispatch, and also our law enforcement information channel. Some people will come in, they'll enjoy the job, but they just fail the process. So that's normal with communication centers throughout the country on two levels. One being that the recruitment is very difficult, the retention is very difficult, and just keeping them in that training process. Some people want to continue to train, but we just know that they're not going to make it through that process. So there's a lot of factors that we've been dealing with over the years, but we do believe that we are on the right side of that. We're finding some really great applicants. We had a wonderful class that is in the dispatch center now that's doing phenomenal. They're getting trained quicker with our new training coordinator, which we are incredibly thankful for. So we're working our way through that. But we still do have the 10 vacancies, which is why with the 4 additional, we're hoping to be able to get all those vacancies filled for next year.
Lastly, do you have any sort of kind of initiative to improve that retention rate? Is there anything internally that you think that may help retain those employees?
So one of the things that we did this past fiscal year was bring up those salaries to meet other communication centers within the state of Connecticut, which I truly believe was not only the right thing to do, but for our own employees, but it's keeping people within our department without leaving to go to other departments throughout the state. Because we've had folks leave to go to Glastonbury, we've had, and with other departments that escape me right now, others that wanted to leave to go to the state of Connecticut that did not leave, and I do think that some of that had to do with the increase in our pay that we have. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at. We are really working with our new employees as they come in from helping those single moms work through the process of, having to deal with working the 3rd shift, yet having their children at home, financial difficulties, working with them to teach them, the best thing to do. And we've made a lot of changes to our training program that even these new employees have said they've really, truly appreciated.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Surgeon?
My pleasure. Oh, that'll help.
That'd be great if you can hear me, right? I apologize, I'm so sorry. You guys are, since I've been with the council, last 4 years, you guys have gotten a new dispatching system. What was the total cost for that? It was about a year ago, I think it was. And the implementation of it, and is that totally all the costs now? Tell me a little bit about the equipment that you bought.
So I would like to get back to you on that total cost because I don't have that exact number off the top of my head. I want to say it was in the area of $3 million for that new computer-aided dispatch and records management system. We did get a $5 million grant from the state of Connecticut, which is what I was speaking to earlier on the grant question. So what that particular grant was for the computer-aided dispatch system and for end-user radio equipment for law enforcement and DPW. So we purchased new portable radios, new mobile radios, and we were able to purchase the hardware for the computer-aided dispatch system. What that particular grant didn't cover was any of the software. So the actual system, computer-aided dispatch system itself, the city funded, and then the hardware piece, the grant was able to fund. And it has been 100% implemented, which is very exciting, and it's been wonderful to dispatch through this system and the reports that we're able to gather. I think that the dispatchers are very appreciative of it, even though for the first couple months they weren't so happy with the change, because they had the old system for about 30 years, so it was a big change for them. But I will be able to let you know exactly in the breakdown between the city portion and the portion that the state of Connecticut paid for.
I think that maybe may answer Councilman Hernandez's question with that increase of the 76,000. I think that new reporting started accurate more. I believe the system gave to the fire department accurate reporting of the incoming calls.
It may. We did a really good job at making sure that all the data was very, very clean. They also do reporting through their records management system. We were also able to transfer 30 years worth of data, which is not typical for our dispatch center that's going to a new CAD system. But we took 30 years worth of data and we put it into the new system. It could have been a fluke. It could have been something that happened with the CAD system. I would hope not, but I suppose anything is possible.
So you will follow back up with Councilman Hernandez with that 76,000 to try to find out why it increased so high.
Yep, absolutely. I will speak with Chief Barco and we'll do a deeper dive into those numbers.
Great. And over the last couple of years, I do have to commend the department with the working with the Human Resource Department and the city and the administration in increasing the salary of the dispatcher, because I know there was a lot of overtime. And as you indicated, a lot of single mothers and working, and the overtime were sometimes mandatory. And so that led to, quality of work environment sometimes wouldn't. So this must have made a difference with the increase in salary, that will probably help with retention of your employees. And I commend you with the new training program, because I do realize how long it takes to hire someone, train them, and then also they have to work a certain period of time before they're actually certified to get on. So I do commend you with that training side of it. That makes logical sense.
Thank you.
In your budget, there was about $1 million. What position are those grant funded for?
So the senior project manager position is a grant-funded position. And then what we typically do is I work with our budget analyst, and we will take a group of the public safety telecommunicators, and we will put that into the grant. So the entire 911 grant that we receive from the state of Connecticut goes right into our salaries. So depending, it fluctuates annually because the grant itself is based on call volume, population, the consumer price index. So the state of Connecticut gives us that grant number, we take that number and we allocate that towards salaries. But it is for dispatchers and for one of our project leaders.
So that grant also helped cover, the increase in salary, the hiring of new employees?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In your presentation, there were I believe about 6 positions for your administration. For your administration, how many of your managers are the ethnicity of your managers?
I'm sorry, how many of the managers are what? I'm
Well,
sorry.
in your organizational chart,
Yeah.
you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 manager position, including your deputy director. Out of those 5 or 6, what are the ethnicity makeup of those managers?
I'm sorry, the what makeup?
How many?
Oh, the ethnicity makeup.
Yes.
I apologize for that.
Sure, that's
Again,
okay.
I will absolutely, I can get that for you.
Oh, so,
That was included in the overall makeup that was reported.
Okay.
The managers were included in that.
but I'm looking at your training manager, your public safety communications supervisor, your support service manager. That is your second tier. I would presume that was your second tier management positions?
Yes, so there's myself, and then, of course, the deputy director would be under me, and then those are the managers that are managing each of those departments. Within our department, there are 5 actual divisions. We have our IT division, we have a radio division, we have the alarms division, we have the public safety, the public safety dispatch center itself, and I think I missed one. Did I say administration? But there's 5 divisions within the department.
Right. So that's what I was asking, the race, ethnicity makeup of those 5 division managers.
Yep, we will definitely get that for you.
Oh, you don't have that?
Well,
don't-
I have it in totality
Oh,
here.
okay.
In the presentation, I have it in totality for the entire department. I did not break it down into the management personnel.
Oh, okay, so Anthony Carter,
He's a black male.
okay. And Michael Bruce,
He's a white male.
and there you have a vacant IT position, and you have a senior admin assistant.
A Hispanic female.
Okay, and so basically the 7 supervisor of the public safety communication, you'll be able to send me that race makeup of those 7.
I can do that.
Okay, great. And then for your third tier manager, your quality improvement coordinator, if you send me the makeup of those, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gale?
Thanks very much. Going back to your presentation, I'm just interested, you started with and gave us the number of calls for fiscal year 2020, which kind of started with a bang because COVID hit in February, March. And so I'm just wondering, it looks like the trend from then to now has been certainly consistently up. Do you recall what it was for 2019? Was there a big drop-off from 2019 to 2020, or did COVID have no effect on your business?
It typically didn't have an effect on the number of calls that we were receiving, but it did impact on the number of calls we were dispatching. Because there were some calls that we were not sending responders to, we were sending other resources. So that's what the change was. But I can certainly do a comparison and add in 2019, because I do know that COVID does make a big difference in what the numbers are.
Well, and we see that, looking at these calls received, you've gone from 416 to 453. It's a fairly substantial increase, which certainly would justify a need for more employees to be able to handle this, the call volume. So I just didn't know if that was consistent across the board. The other thing that I noticed in here is the number, I think it was police calls. And this is kind of like, similar question was asked about fire. If you look on page 5, in 2020, you're showing police calls of 275,000. And then it, drops off to almost half the next year. And then even fewer this year. So what do we read from that trend?
That's a great question, and I think I will speak to Chief Barco relative to those fire calls and what he attributes the increase in calls to. I can speak with Chief Doty to see what he believes the decrease in these number of calls were.
Okay, so
Yeah,
these were trends that you particularly noted as they were occurring here.
Well, obviously we noted, we could see that they were occurring. Whether we know why the trend is happening wasn't something that we aggressively looked into.
Was everybody calling the police as soon as COVID hit? Did everybody call the police to find out where to get their
Well, yeah, and then you could see that significant reduction too. But again, we can compare those numbers to 2019. And I think that might answer some of our questions too.
I had one question about the grants. I know you talked a little bit about them, and I see that in the printout that we get, mentions that one of the largest grant you get seems to be a yearly grant. You mentioned that comes from the state. Then there's a second grant for about $250,000 that says it's a one-time grant.
So we do apply for grants through the state of Connecticut on a regular basis when we see that there's a need. The state of Connecticut also offers a capital expenditure grant. As a matter of fact, we just applied for one and we're approved for that, and it's a 50% match by the city. So those grants can come as necessary, and if it meets the criteria of the grant, we'll apply for it, but it's typically available for us. So that would be more of a one-time grant. And then some of those dollars are also attributed to that $5 million grant that we're still spending down.
Okay. So these are one-time, but they're also reflective of one-time expenses that your department is looking at.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Last question. I think we've talked about this over the years, the ability of Hartford to perhaps service other towns. I think you have expressed to us in the past that there's been some conversations, or you're not against having those conversations. I'm just wondering what's the current status of these conversations.
Sure, absolutely. And I came from a regional communications center.
I remember that.
Yeah, I've always been an advocate of regional communications. It's certainly an option for the city of Hartford. I think it's more of an issue of the smaller municipalities, because we wouldn't regionalize and go outside of Hartford with another municipality. We would want them to come in and join our communications center. Connecticut is, of course, we always say, is different than most states, where we have a lot of small towns as opposed to regional, even forms of government. So it's those smaller municipalities that need to make that decision whether they want to come into a municipality such as Hartford. So those are always options for us in Hartford to work with other municipalities on a regional basis.
I take it none of them are knocking at our door, though.
No, nobody's knocking.
All right, thanks very much.
Of course.
Councilwoman Hercules?
Thank you, Madam President. Through you. First, thank you, Director Webster, for your presentation and, of course, for your leadership and service. I'd be interested to see the data for the number of calls broken down at the neighborhood level. Do you guys keep that level of data, or zip code even?
The police department typically does that through
Right.
their ComStat reports, and they break it down into neighborhoods, particular crimes that are occurring in those types of neighborhoods, and the fire department also does that.
Yeah, I guess I know that those two departments do it. I'm just, because of those calls where police or fire are not needed, kind of going to Councilman LeBron's question about people who may have heavy utilization of mental health services and things like that. I'm just wondering, in terms of like the neighborhood level, where police or fire may not have been the responders, if you have.
No, that's a great question, right? Because they're not going out with the HART team, so it may not be something that's being captured currently. So that's something we can definitely look into doing. We don't do that currently, but that doesn't mean we can't do that in the future.
Yeah, that would be great. Also, with the training academy, that sounds really exciting. Could you just kind of walk me through like how the recruitment for that is being done? Because this is honestly the first time I'm hearing about it, and that's something that I definitely would want to like trumpet the next time that comes around, because that's an excellent opportunity for people interested in pursuing this career.
Of course, and we've actually been doing some fairs as well in trying to get out to the community. We've been working with the police department and the fire department to do some career fairs, so you can look for us out there too, or let us know if you know of any. But yes, the training academy is great. We do 6 weeks in classroom training to prepare the dispatchers to go out and get onto the dispatch floor. It's hard to just put somebody in a chair, even next to somebody else, and teach them everything they need to know about the city of Hartford. So we did a deep dive into everything that they need to know. We do some outside training as far as being an emergency medical dispatcher, which is a requirement of the state of Connecticut. They go through the state of Connecticut telecommunicator training. They get certified at NCIC Collect, which is what the officers do as well. They get a bunch of training in NIMS through FEMA. And then they do a lot of classroom in-house training on how to answer calls, how to process calls, how to use a computer dispatch system. So when we take them and move them onto the dispatch floor, they can sit down, put on a headset, and say, Hartford 911, what's the address of the emergency, without having that much coaching. So after that 6-week program, they'll work with one of their mentors or a center training officer in the dispatch center. They'll start out with administrative calls, they'll move on to 911 calls, and it usually takes maybe 4 to 6 weeks to get comfortable in that position. Once they're done in that position, they'll move on to one of the other more critical positions, whether it be EMS dispatch, law enforcement dispatch, which is really the most difficult position for anybody to get through, and it really takes the longest. The information channel, where you're running queries for on license plates, vehicle identification numbers, persons, date of birth, for the law enforcement officers in the field, and then fire dispatch. So all of those positions together typically will take an additional 3 to 4 months. Previously, it was taking 9 months to get someone through the training program. And since Anthony Carter has come in to take over our training program, he's drilled it down, he's pulled out everything that was really critical for them. They listened to recorded 911, actual Hartford 911 calls, and talk through it with the entire group to see what you would do with that call. And we've welcomed them with open arms as well, which has been great. So that's kind of an outline of the training program. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Just a couple of questions kind of about that. So you mentioned there were 17 in the academy, 11 retained. Do you know about how many of those are Hartford residents of that, like, new class of trainees by chance?
That is a good question. We do have that number within our spreadsheet here, but we can break that down for you.
Yeah, that'd be good to know. And then, just because from my own knowledge, like, what are the requirements to be a dispatcher in your telecommunications center? So, in addition to obviously the training, but like just coming into, do you have to have a college degree? What are kind of like the basic qualifications?
Sure, and they are basic. You need to be 18 years of age. You need to have a high school diploma or GED, and you have to have a clean criminal record. You can't have any felonies because you do have access to criminal database, and that's it. We put you through all of the additional training that you need through our training program.
That's
We
really
have people
good.
with master's degrees, we have people with GEDs, and they have the exact same job on that dispatch floor.
Awesome, thank you. And just my last question, because you had mentioned this is a very stressful job, and especially in light of the pandemic. So I'm just curious about kind of the employee assistance programs, like outside of obviously what HR may do, but certainly at this level, just like police officers or fire, I'd imagine that dispatchers and those working in your department are probably dealing with a lot of vicarious trauma. And so I'm just curious about kind of what types of things you guys do in-house to deal with that.
And I appreciate that you recognize that, because quite often they aren't recognized for having issues because they take horrific calls, and sometimes they have no closure. You get off the phone with somebody that had a heart attack, and you're providing CPR instructions, the fire department EMS get there, and you never hear another thing. Or a home invasion or any type of emergency that could happen. So they definitely struggle. And Jeff and I have both referred people to the EAP program set up through the city of Hartford on several occasions. And they're very good with each other because they're in public safety and they can talk to each other. But the supervisors know what to look for. They know how to identify that someone is struggling with something. They can pull them off the floor, have a conversation, relieve them of the duty for the day if they need to. We just spoke with, it was recently where one of our dispatchers had to do CPR over the phone on a 6-month-old. And she had been in EMS previously, but it was incredibly difficult for her. But they do well with each other. We refer them to EAP, and Teresa Velez from Hartford Police Department has also been excellent with our dispatchers.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And before I pass it on to Councilman Clark, I was going to ask the same question about the employee assistance when they go through some sort of trauma. But what's the starting hourly rate? When you say here that, you brought their, you increased their hourly rate to be more competitive throughout Connecticut. What's the starting hourly rate?
Well, I can tell you that we're about $10,000 on an annual basis below other dispatch centers. I want to get you those numbers exactly because I don't have it. Do you know off the top of your head? I know numbers.
Okay. So can you just send it to all of us?
Of course.
Thank you. Councilman
course.
Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Director Webster, so good to see you.
You as well, sir.
Great job on your presentation. Of course, I see you every month, so I don't have too many questions for you. Going off the fact regarding EAP, which I think is very critical, in addition to that, what's the amount of time off that your staff has? Is that contractual by union? Because I know that you have your office is unionized, correct?
Yep, it's contractual. So the dispatchers are in Local 1716. The supervisors are in HMIA, as is some of my other administrative staff. And I have one gentleman in my IT division that's in HPA.
Okay. And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, those vacation times are automatic every fiscal year, and then their staff is responsible for basically keeping track of the amount of vacation times during the course of that fiscal year?
I believe they get it on a monthly basis.
Monthly basis, okay.
And it's in their paycheck, so it says exactly on their paycheck what type of time that they have left.
Okay. And so moving on, within your budget, is there anything that's budgeted for capital improvements for ES&T?
Capital improvements, the major capital improvement is the radio infrastructure. So that was a big piece. It was budgeted over I believe it was a 5-year period to upgrade the radio infrastructure.
So what we see in the budget for capital improvements is just the annualized amount for this upcoming fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I don't believe we had anything else in capital expenditures.
With those improvements, is there anything contractual that we need to that we're paying for, or is just the construction for the upgrades?
So we'll be doing construction at 4 different sites. We currently we have 3 sites. We're reducing by 1, but then we're putting up additional 2 sites. So we'll do some outfitting to those particular sites, and then the radio infrastructure itself, which includes a microwave system for backup and redundancy.
So we have the Hartford's roof, 280 Trumbull Street, correct?
Which we will eliminate.
Okay, and what are the other 2?
So we have a site at a fire department in Weathersfield, right over the Hartford line, that we're going to be using. We also have the public safety complex, and we are putting up a site over at Mount Sinai Hospital.
Okay, and is there a particular main site, or they're all the same?
No, this type of system between the 3 sites, not the public safety complex, but the Weathersfield site, the Hartford Insurance Group, and Mount Sinai, they'll be all working together. One could go down, the other 2 will continue to work. But what they'll do is the radio that's transmitting will pick up on the closest site to them, and that's the way that this particular infrastructure works.
Such as like a triangular type of model for signal. Okay.
Yep, and in the future, we could put up additional sites to even improve on the coverage, but we feel as though this coverage is going to be very, very good to include better in-building coverage.
Regarding the level of proximity, is there any type of science or method as to why these particular sites were selected?
Yes, we did a huge study on this. They looked at the topography of the landscape. We looked at buildings that might cause an issue with transmitting. We talked to different radio vendors who had different sites throughout the city. And then once we chose the locations, they were able to do studies to see what the coverage would be with all 3 sites up, with just Weathersfield and Mount Sinai, with just the Hig and Mount Sinai. Sorry, I usually use microphones. So we looked at all of that just to see where the coverage was and where we might have deficiencies. So there was a tremendous amount of work put into that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Moving on, my last set of questions regarding the HEART team. Can you please just jog my memory, and also too, just for the clarity for my council colleagues, where does the HEART team sit? Does it sit within ES&T?
So they are all at their own locations. which would be Wheeler, Mobile Crisis, and CRT. So we take and process all of those calls, and then we communicate with them to give them the initial call for service over the phone, and then we communicate via radio. So they're all off-site.
And so do they go out, so when the team is mobilized, they transport their own selves to the particular site for a call for service?
Correct. Yep.
Do they have any type of commercialized vehicle that identifies that they're a HART team, or they may show up in their personal vehicle?
I know that CRT has vehicles and they have placards on the side that say CRT, and they're also wearing clothing that identifies them as members of the HART team. I'm not sure what Wheeler does or what Capital Region Mental Health does.
Okay. And far as that reporting for those calls for service, who actually keeps those calls for service recorded?
We do in the
You do?
dispatch center.
Okay.
Yes.
And the police department, most of the police department, they keep track of that as well, just for their record keeping and analysis?
Only if they're responding to the call as well. There's some specific calls that will send a co-response. If there's any violence, if there's any weapons involved, if there's larger crowds, we'll also send the police department. So they'll have a record as responding as a co-responder to those calls, but they don't keep a record if one of those teams goes out on their own.
Okay. All right. And so is there any special coding that's placed in the log as to the HART team has gone out with the police department for a call for service?
I'm not sure. I know that it will say that it's a CRT or a HART team response within the computer dispatch system. I'm not sure. Are you aware of that by any chance? Well, it's one or the other, yeah. So we wouldn't track them both as a co-response. Although in the records management system of HPD, they may do that. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. And is the HART team ever dispatched with the fire department?
Yes, if it's a medical call of some sort, they may go with fire from the fire's medical response.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman LeBron?
Yes, so just on the 2019 data, I think Councilwoman Hercules, Councilman Gale, and you, Director, were talking about, reflecting, so I have it here. So it was 164,000, police calls were 164,467, and the fire, well, I might as well just name them. The fire was 22,955. The fire suppression was 7,970, and the number of ambulances were 35,597. So it looks like 2020 COVID did jump. The police calls did jump as a result of COVID, and I would hope that the reduction all the way down in 2022 of police responses was impacted by the HART team. That would be a great thing, and that was the goal and the design of the HART team. So just wanted to just throw those stats out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
We all set? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
You too.
We'll get back on all those questions that you had as well.
Wonderful. And if you could copy all council.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
And now, we are proceeding with the agenda. And up next will be the Department of Public Works. Good evening, Department of Public Works. With us this evening is the Director, Mike Looney, and the Deputy Director, Pachel Naylor. It's nice to see you guys in person. Welcome. And so, Director Looney, the floor is yours to start your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Council President, and thank you to all our council members here tonight. We're here to do the budget presentation for the Department of Public Works. As you mentioned, I'm Michael Looney. I'm the Director of Public Works, and with me is Pachel Naylor, our Deputy Director. I'm not going to read our whole mission statement, but we have an extensive mission statement about what our goals as a department are, and it's really centered around dedication to excellence, integrity, and stewardship for all the different functions in which we're responsible for taking care of throughout the city. Our departmental organization chart looks like this. We have about 10 separate divisions, of which we have a total currently of 217 FTE positions, and that's our current, not what our employment would be with the passage of this budget. Just go over some quick highlights of our different divisions and what they've been working on in this fiscal year. Facilities has been extremely busy. I think one of the most remarkable things is the number of 311 tickets that they have responded to this year. It was about 600 tickets in 2020. This past calendar year of 2022, that had increased to about 2,300 311 tickets. So a pretty remarkable uptick. I think some of that 600 in 2020 and 750 in 2021 were probably impacted by the pandemic. But still, it is an indication that this division has been particularly hard-pressed to meet all of its obligations this year, and they've done quite well in everything that they've undertaken. We're still doing, as we have in past years, LED light conversion projects. We're working on the pools and repairs to splash pads and the pond aerators. They continue to undertake the daily maintenance and custodial functions for all of our city facilities, as well as organizing the system repairs that have to occur to keep those facilities up and running. Our architecture and engineering division has been extremely busy as well, as was probably pointed out in the the CIP presentation last night. We've completed fire station number 11. The futsal court in Colt Park is well underway and actually nearing completion this spring. A number of other successful projects. The Pope Park T-ball field was completed. We're continuing to move forward with a managed pavement maintenance program. We're looking to address this year about 48 different streets throughout the city, and a number of other projects involving sidewalks, lighting, and streetscape improvements. We also have the Hartford Parks Trust Fund projects that are overseen by our city architect. We're continuing to work on those this year, and other important capital projects that have come up, ADA improvements, additional work on Firehouse 5, which is the next one in our rotation of firehouses to be renovated. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a number of streetscape improvement projects such as Maple Avenue and Franklin Avenue, and improvements at our golf courses, both Keeney and Goodwin. Our traffic division is relatively small. We just filled a critical position in that division just about 2 weeks ago, so we're very excited about that. But there are a wide range of traffic signalization projects that are either in the bidding or procurement phase of their lifetime right now. We did complete construction of a new traffic signal and intersection improvements at Weston and Jennings up in the North Meadows area of town. Bosey Barlow Bridge, the repair project there has been completed, which was sorely needed, and we're glad to have that taken care of. There's also been very significant emphasis in working with our colleagues at Development Services regarding traffic calming and improving traffic flow at a wide range of intersections and over substantial stretches of roadway. 2 roundabouts are in design for New Britain Avenue, and we had the Sigourney Street roundabout, which we work with primarily with CTDOT, was also completed in this past year. Our streets team has now has its second hot box apparatus, which allows for year-round pothole patching instead of just using the cold patch that we would get from a supplier. We're able to make small amounts of our own asphalt so that we can continue to do pothole filling that is longer lasting than with cold patch, even during the winter months. Our street sweeping program has also been an area of focus. Normally we've done 3 seasons, spring, summer, and fall. It was so mild at times this winter that we were actually doing street sweeping during the winter months, which is, I think, the first time we've done that in quite a while. So that's been a favorable development. We've been able to focus more on tasks that would normally have to be left until spring or summer over the winter, just due to the fact that we had quite a bit less in the way of snowfall this year, which freed up more time and resources to focus on other street projects. We're on pace now to fill about 5,000 potholes, up from about 4,100, I believe, last fiscal year, and to sweep over 10,000 lane miles of city streets, which is also up from about 9,000. Our fleet equipment services continues to do the repairs for all the city vehicles, including DPW, HPD, the other city departments, with the exception of fire, BOE, and similar organizations that are connected with the city. About 3,000 repair work orders are on deck for this year. It looks like we're going to hit that number. And we've also been very active in working with management and budget in terms of budgeting for new vehicles and equipment for a number of our divisions that are in need of replacement vehicles. Waste and recycling, we've effectively transitioned from going to the Mira burn plant, which, as everyone is aware, was closed this past year, and we're now with Murphy Road Recycling. We were expecting to see significant savings in tip fees, and it's actually considerably higher, projected to be considerably higher than I had estimated at the end of last year, so that's also a very positive development. We continue to use our bulky waste appointment system. About 5,000 appointments have been made so far in this fiscal year, so we'll probably be up around the 6,000, 7,000 mark by the end of June. And we're on pace to dispose of about a little over 10,000 tons of bulky waste, somewhere between 13 and 14,000 mattresses, and over 33,000 tons of municipal solid waste for this fiscal year. Our Parks Division continues to hum along, maintaining our not just our park areas and our passive recreation areas, but the active recreation fields and different amenities such as playscapes. There were almost so far 1,000 field permits that are projected to be issued for this fiscal year. So, as everyone is quite well aware, we have a very significant usage of our fields and our park assets. The golf courses have continued to perform strongly. Parks has also worked with forestry in terms of pruning and clearing overgrown areas of the park system that allows us to maintain things in a bit more timely and efficient manner, and continued our gardening displays for various recreational locations and scenic areas such as Elizabeth Park and around city facilities, and continue to work with all of our other divisions in addressing major maintenance projects concerning the exterior of various facilities. Forestry, We are probably going to be in the area of about 750 trees planted across the city just by through our contractors, not including private entities planting trees on their property. We're also on pace for about 2,000 trees having been pruned and maintained, and removal of about 800 hazardous trees. As everyone knows, there's been a number of environmental impacts on our tree canopy over the last 5 or 6 years that have caused us to be very aggressive in terms of making sure that we get to hazardous trees, identify them, and get them down in a timely manner. And 311 requests coming in from our citizens are also a big part of the forestry team's work. Our flood division continues to implement the many components of the SWIFT plan, which is under the oversight of the Army Corps of Engineers. So there are a number of projects that they've been working on of substantial size that we need to complete in order to keep our levee system as in as best shape as we can and in compliance with the federal government. Some of our strategic initiatives, getting back to basics, trying to continually improve on our quality and the consistency of our traditional services that we provide. We're still working, we were doing this last year and we continue to do it this year, working at the regional and state level to figure out a solid waste plan that works for not just Hartford, but the entire region and the entire state. Increasing compliance with recycling regulations for our residents is something that we want to continue to work on. We have had a significant amount of contamination that we're trying to tackle, and that will only help further reduce our waste disposal costs going forward. We've also been engaged very intensively with DEEP from the state, MDC, and the EPA in addressing and coming up with solutions for both long-term and short-term flooding issues that we've had so much experience with in our city neighborhoods in the last couple of years. Our street sweeping program, as I alluded to before, we continue to modify that, including changing routes, new signage, and continual outreach to the neighborhood groups and the NRZs. Traffic calming, complete streets, quality of life initiatives are really three of the big things that we're going to be focusing on this year, in conjunction with the first two being in conjunction with our colleagues at Development Services, but also for quality of life within our own Blight division, as I'll point out shortly. So from a budget standpoint, our recommended budget for fiscal year 24 is increasing by about 11%. A significant portion of that is tied to salaries for a increase of 15 positions over what we have now, so that would get us from 217 to 232 employees. Another significant feature of our budget is going to be the establishment of a quality of life unit within the Blight Remediation Team Division that will go around the cities, visit neighborhood by neighborhood to address issues such as cleaning catch basins, dealing with litter, other issues that have been particularly problematic for our residents. We have a small increase in non-personnel line items, but what we've tried to do is be very efficient in matching expenditures with budget and moving money, reallocating funds within our budget to cover areas where we may have been short in prior years, rather than asking for new money when we already have some extra money left in some other line items. So we've been working on that since last year. And again, salary expenses really make up the bulk of this 2.1 million increase, and obviously mandated growth increments and MOU related increases for certain position classes per the negotiations with our unions. So again, I'm not going to read each one of these, but we're really focusing on as I mentioned before, quality of life issues, blight remediation, litter control, continuing to deal with bulky waste and illegal dumping, and then the road maintenance and street sweeping aspects of our responsibility. Our staff composition, 61% of our staff are residents of the city of Hartford. By race and ethnicity, we break down about 32% Hispanic, 49% black, and 17 to 18% white, 1.6% other, which is generally in keeping, not exactly, but very close to the diversity that we see in the resident population of the city of Hartford overall. By gender, we are about 10% female and 90% male. So that concludes the formal presentation we have, and at your direction, Madam President, be happy to take questions from council members.
Thank you, Director Looney, for your presentation. Councilman Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Director Looney, thank you for your presentation. I'm just going to get right to my questions. Some of the improvements regarding traffic, do you have, is there anything within your budget to do an initial analysis for a study on traffic signalization?
I'm sorry, for signalization?
Yes.
We don't have anything specifically earmarked for that, I don't believe. We have a number of intersections that are part of a CIP project. I believe it's about 10 to 12 intersections that we're looking at. That's in the works right now. But no, we don't have anything specifically to set aside to study re-signalizing the city or changing a significant number of the timings.
So with that, with the 10 intersections that you have within this budget, is the signalization expected to change this fiscal year?
Yes, as part of those projects, the signalization, the timing, that all gets tweaked and updated for the conditions that we have now versus what they may have been in years past.
Do you have a list of those?
I can certainly get that for you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is on your list the corner of Westbourne Parkway and Albany Avenue?
I would have to check the list, but I can see if that location is on there.
If it's not, it should be added on there. Councilwoman Surgeon can attest to the 5-second green light that continually happens on a...
Well, if it has an issue now, actually, I believe that signal may be a state signal because of it.
Because of Albany Avenue?
Route 44. So I'll be happy to call
Please.
our friends at DOT.
It needs to change. It increases the traffic on Westbourne going down to Homestead. Let's see. Traffic calming. I know we've been talking about this for the past couple of years, and DPW did send out a notice to residents within the Northeast neighborhood, Blue Hills neighborhood regarding streets. Is there any plans within this budget for traffic calming for Northeast neighborhood, Blue Hills neighborhood, and the West End sections?
The funds that we have set aside for that are a part of the CIP budget. We do have traffic calming dollars allocated in that budget, and the plan that we're working with right now with DDS does include improvements in the Blue Hills area, Blue Hills neighborhood, and we are looking at locations in the West End as well as streets such as Tower Parkway up in the Northeast neighborhood, as well as some other streets up there. So we are going to be looking at those neighborhoods and hopefully being able to expend traffic calming funding in those neighborhoods.
Do you have a ETA as to when actual construction will be taking place? Because I know there's a time allotted for planning and design.
Yeah, I can certainly get that for you. I know there's still a lot of conversations going on, and what are the right measures, and once we work with the neighborhoods and identify the best solutions, then we'll go into the procurement process. But I can certainly get you a more
Okay.
specific timeline.
Thank you. Also to include, I know Councilman LeBron, if he was here, he probably wouldn't want to advocate for Milner School. There's been some traffic issues, I think more so on the backside and as you're coming out of the driveway for that as well. We hopefully, part of the measures aren't those beautiful looking white poles that stick up on the street. Maybe there'll be some type of different design, just to keep that in the forefront of your mind.
Yes, we're looking at a whole bunch of different options in terms of what we can do. And there are a lot of different products out there. It doesn't have to just be that one type. So that's certainly something we're looking at.
Has there been any discussion regarding the roundabouts that they have now placed around certain areas to put that on other intersections to curb traffic?
We've looked at a couple of locations, and that's something that's still in process. As I mentioned in the presentation, we have the ones on New Britain Avenue that we're pursuing, but we are open to other locations, and there might be a couple that I think could be appropriate for usage at those intersections.
Okay. And also too, so Genie has been let out of the box regarding the, because we discussed this earlier this week, the proposed Parks and Recreation ordinance. I just would like to know, how does the parks part of that affect DPW? And is golf courses included under your Parks Division?
Golf courses are technically included under our Parks Division, yes.
Have you thought about an analysis, running any numbers yet as to how that actually would affect DPW if this ordinance would be actually adopted?
We haven't really gotten into that level of detail, no.
Okay. Thank you. We'll be coming back for more information regarding that. In the bulky waste appointments, how much in the budget, as far as revenue, has DPW received from bulky waste appointments?
We actually have not, I can get you a specific number, but it has not been a large amount. And that's primarily because we have 2 appointments per housing unit. So if you have a six family building, you essentially get 12, a total of 12 appointments for the year for that building. And most properties, I believe, have stayed within their number of appointments per year. And that includes when we have to go out, if it's been placed, if bulky waste has been placed and without an appointment, and we pick it up to get it off the street, we then charge that property one of their appointments, one of their 2 free appointments. So even in doing that, I don't believe that number has been that large, but I can get you the specific number.
Okay. And regarding trees, for tree planting, is that comes out of DPW's budget if when trees are planted in the city?
That's primarily drawn from CIP, and going forward, we'll be drawing more from the Hartford Parks Trust Fund, which has a line item of funding for that specific purpose.
Okay. And if a resident that had a tree taken out needs a tree put back, who are the correct, the appropriate people to speak with? Is that within your department?
Well, actually, as part of this budget, one of the positions that is being proposed is to have a planting site person and an outreach person who would essentially go around and identify sites for planting trees and then work with homeowners and neighborhood groups in terms of determining which sites were actually the most beneficial. We've had some concerns from residents about having trees in front of their house, the maintenance with the leaves. There have been concerns about roots impacting sewer lines and things of that nature. So we don't want to just go out and start dropping trees in front of folks' houses without having a dialogue with them first. So that staff members, along with a couple of other functions, but their primary function would be to reach out and get this plan in place and do that on a daily basis. Right now, the city forester would be the person talk with about getting a tree planted if one is desired by a resident.
Okay, thank you for that. I just put this bug in your ear that Blue Hills needs some trees in the neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assistant Majority Leader. Councilman Nick LeBron?
And first I'll start, Majority Leader, did you bring up the carve-outs for the speed bumps that we had talked about yesterday with Director Looney? I don't want to repeat the question
For
yet.
Milner, I didn't go into specific detail, so you can.
Okay, all
you
right,
can talk
thank
to
you.
him.
So Director Looney, there was a communication for Milner and, Tower Avenue and Hillside, specifically Milner and McDonough schools. They're middle schools, and so under the current contract, because they're middle schools, they don't get crossing guards. But I would argue that middle school students think they're fearless, and they probably need safety more so than anyone else. And so with that being said, we saw a listing of speed bumps for those two schools respectively. And there was a list that came out, and when we were talking yesterday, it didn't seem that those were scheduled. And I just want to just highlight the concern, particularly on Tower Avenue, when you're heading eastbound on Tower and you come over that hill. And that's exactly where the kids cross the street. And they don't have the adequate supervision. Where are we with these speed bumps, Director Looney?
Well, what we have done is we've done some additional signage and markings out at those two locations. Talked to our traffic division has talked to the school principals. They've been, from what I understand, very happy about the changes that have been made, the increased signage and the increased visibility. Particularly Tower. Tower is quite complicated, and it's a location that I don't believe really where a speed hump is the most appropriate traffic calming tool. Similarly with Hillside. So that's why those locations are still being discussed and thought about. I mentioned Tower earlier with the majority leader's question as being an area that our team with DDS is looking at. I think we can do something that's effective and more appropriate for the usage that we have on those streets.
Yeah, Director, I know it's a more complicated question, right? It intertwines with the police department and the crossing guards. There's traffic engineering. But I just recall my first year on council. I can't believe it's been 4 years. And Flatbush Avenue was having issues. And there were measures, calming measures, but none of them were working until someone died. And so we have to try to be more preventative regardless of the situation. And then after that person died on Flatbush Avenue, then we got all the things that we had wanted. And so we have an opportunity here, regardless of the red tape, to potentially save a child's life. And whatever you need me to do to help you, if you need me to speak on the mountaintops, if you need me to speak at a meeting, you need me to speak wherever you need me to speak to advocate to getting that done, please reach out to my office and I will be there. I'll move my schedule around because it's that important. Thank you, Director.
Councilman Hernandez, do you have any questions? Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Question. More than potholes on the streets, which is what, normally, we refer to them. I personally experience a lot of uneven streets with the sewage cover plate. Is that the right term? Can't remember. I think manhole cover. I
The
don't know.
manholes, yes.
Manholes.
that is
Okay,
correct.
there you go. I experienced that more than anything else. Is that something that normally falls under the purview of items to look into? Does that normally causes the same kind of damage as a regular pothole? I'm not sure. I just know that I go over them so many times that it is concerning, and I see it on every street that I drive through. I just want to kind of get a little bit more info on how that works.
So yes, Councilman, they can be as damaging as hitting a pothole. Any sort of feature in a street like that can cause similar damage, I believe. Back several months ago, I drafted and sent a letter to all of the utility companies. They are technically responsible for their infrastructure in our roadways. So if you have a sunken sewer manhole, MDC is supposed to take care of that, come out, raise it, make it level with the street grade. And so some of the utilities have been very good and very responsive since that letter. I expressed my strong and substantial concern over what I was seeing, and particularly along our main corridors, pretty much citywide, with this infrastructure needing to be generally needed to be raised in order to be up to the grade of the road rather than lowered. So we continue to harp on that, and as I mentioned, certain utilities have been more responsive, and we're just going to continue to push the issue.
Is there any follow-up to that request if nothing happens? And it seems like some utilities have responded better than others. For those that are not responding according to your expectations, is there any plan B, any follow-up that will happen in order to make it happen?
Well, one of the things I'm planning on doing is talking to our Corporation Counsel and seeing what sort of legal powers I may have or the city may have in terms of can we deny the issuance of permits for utilities that don't comply and don't fix that. And I want to see what sort of tools we have in our toolbox to really, instead of continually sending letters, a first letter is good, but going forward I agree that you want to take something a little bit more strenuous action than just a letter, and so we're going to be looking into what tools we might have to be able to do that.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Director Looney. So since we're speaking about speed humps, something that I have done that has worked very well through Director Looney's department, and I don't know if this has reached him, but maybe to Petrella's, I've just done a petition, and I've given it to the residents and on the streets, and they've basically gone through the entire street, have taken signatures, and have asked for where they want to have the speed hump, and it really hasn't taken DPW, I tell you, not even a month to go out there and put them up. So for that, I want to thank you. And Director Looney, I have another petition off of Flatbush on Bannister Street. There's usually a lot of accidents there. So we had a couple of residents go out there and collect 25 signatures, 25 homes. So I'm going to email this to your office and see if we can try to put that in the books as soon as possible.
Okay.
And I have no questions. We'll be sending a couple of questions via email if you can respond to everyone, but I want to thank you for the great job that you and Deputy Petrell are doing. But let me ask you something. When you promote within, right, do you have some sort of training program for supervisors that you promote within so that they're not set up to fail because they don't have the proper training, whether it be to deal with other employees, how to manage them?
We actually have, we've been doing a lot of training recently. Petrella has been leading the charge on that front and has done a great job of getting a lot more training for our employees than we had seen perhaps in prior years. And one of the things we are focusing on, Petrella, you can jump in as well, about what we're going to be doing with some of the programs we put together as part of our employee improvement plan.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Actually, we have several trainings that has been set up for every Wednesday from 1 to 2. And it's actually for our superintendents, our supervisors, and our team leaders. And it's a series, so it's like effective communication, transitioning from rank and file to a supervisor, and it will go on until Wednesday, I believe May 31st is our last one. The problem was, you know, we're still in a pandemic, so what was happening is they could do the trainings via Zoom. However, with our staff, I felt like we needed to do our trainings in person and not via Zoom because we need hands-on, we need role-playing and so forth. So that's why I wanted to wait till we were able to do them in person. So that's where we are right now with them. And they actually have been going very well. We have been doing a lot of role-playing. We actually had one today that was very good. And I don't, want to touch on everything because we want to keep what's going on inside of them confidential. But to answer your question, yes, we will start doing trainings from rank and file that will be going up to supervisors because it is much needed.
Thank you for that. And we're going to take a brief pause. The mayor has an event downstairs, and so they're going to say a prayer at 7:15. So maybe we'll be back in 20 minutes, but I apologize, but some of the council members do want to go downstairs, and so it was agreed upon that we would take a quick break. So for those of you who want to go downstairs and be part of the iftar, if you guys want to go, but they have a meal downstairs and a prayer, Councilwoman Hercules. So to Hartford Public Access and our viewers, if you could please put us on a brief pause until we come back, thank you.